Truth is this. You are all being used.
The vigilante citizen that some believe the authorities have failed to provide, allowing crime to flourish unchecked.
There's been a lot said about me, so I thought you should hear directly from me. I'm here to help you take that control back. The state, court, failed you, but they only exist to control you. Do you want justice?
Yes.
Let's get some fresh blood. You walk down the street and you get stabbed or robbed.
He's a real hero.
We need more.
What is your...
Our current system is failing to protect our citizens.
He's like the real deal.
He's playing with us.
What if everything... We can change history.
What if one man stopped waiting for the law and decided to become the law himself? Citizen Vigilante isn't just another action thriller, it is one of the most controversial movies of 2026. From shocking violence and non-stop debates to Army Hammer's biggest comeback and director Uwe Boll's fearless approach, this film has divided audiences across the world. Some people call it a modern revenge masterpiece, while others believe it goes too far. So, what makes this movie so talked about? Stay with me until the end because we are exploring everything from its hidden details and behind the scenes secrets to the ending controversies, interesting facts, and the reasons why everyone can't stop talking about it. When people first heard about Citizen Vigilante, many expected another low budget revenge movie. But as more information came out, it became clear that this project was aiming for something much bigger. Directed, written, and produced by Uwe Boll, the film immediately attracted attention because of its controversial subject matter and because it marked one of Armie Hammer's highest profile returns to leading roles after several years away from mainstream Hollywood. The story follows Sanders, a wealthy American businessman who loses faith in the justice system. Instead of relying on courts and police, he begins hunting criminals himself. His actions quickly spread across social media, turning him into both a hero and a criminal depending on who is watching. While ordinary citizens began supporting his mission, law enforcement sees him as a dangerous threat that could inspire chaos. One of the most interesting things about this movie is that it wasn't always called Citizen Vigilante. During production, the project was originally titled The Dark Knight. However, that title created legal concerns because it is famously associated with Batman and Warner Brothers. Rather than continuing a legal battle, the filmmakers eventually changed the title to Citizen Vigilante. Even this simple title change generated headlines months before the movie reached audiences, giving the production unexpected publicity. Director Uwe Boll has spent decades building a reputation as one of cinema's most controversial filmmakers. Some audiences enjoy his fearless style, while others strongly criticize his work. Instead of avoiding criticism, Ball often embraces it, and Citizen Vigilante follows that same philosophy. Rather than presenting a simple action movie, he attempts to create a discussion about crime, justice, corruption, and public frustration with legal systems. Whether viewers agree with his message or not, few people leave the movie without having an opinion. The casting immediately became one of the biggest talking points. Army Hammer plays Sanders, the central vigilante whose personal mission slowly grows into an international media phenomenon. According to the filmmakers, Hammer's calm appearance combined with physical presence made him suitable for portraying someone who appears controlled on the outside while becoming increasingly dangerous underneath. Costas Mandylor joins the cast as Henry, the law enforcement official determined to stop Sanders before his actions inspire more violence. The production officially entered development in early 2025. Principal photography began in Croatia during January 2025 and continued for several months before wrapping in April. Croatia's streets, coastal cities, and historic architecture provide the film with a realistic European atmosphere that separates it visually from many American vigilante thrillers. Instead of relying heavily on digital backgrounds, much of the movie uses real locations, giving every chase and confrontation a grounded feeling. Cinematographer Matthias Neumann focused on creating sharp contrasts between peaceful city life and sudden bursts of violence, making every action sequence feel more immediate. The movie's music was composed by Rodolfo Matulik, whose score combines tense orchestral themes with modern electronic sounds. Rather than constantly playing loud action music, the soundtrack often becomes quiet before major confrontations, allowing suspense to build naturally. This approach makes the action scenes feel even more intense once they finally explode onto the screen. Interesting facts: the movie was originally titled The Dark Knight before being renamed. Most filming took place on real locations in Croatia instead of studio sets. Armie Hammer's character becomes a social media celebrity within the story itself. The film blends action, thriller, mystery, and crime genres instead of focusing only on revenge. Much of the early publicity came from controversy surrounding both its subject matter and its title change. As Sanders continues his campaign against criminals, The movie begins to move away from being a simple revenge thriller and slowly transforms into a psychological study of power. At first, his actions appear almost understandable. He targets people who seem untouchable by the justice system, and many ordinary citizens start believing that he is doing what the police and courts have failed to do. News reports inside the film began covering every attack, social media clips of his actions spread rapidly, and his identity becomes one of the hottest topics in the country. The filmmakers use this growing media attention to show how quickly public opinion can change. One day Sanders is treated like a dangerous criminal, and the next day thousands of people are calling him a hero. The screenplay spends a surprising amount of time exploring the reactions of ordinary people instead of focusing only on action scenes. Television debates, online discussions, and conversations between strangers all reveal different opinions about vigilantism. Some believe Sanders represents justice for victims who have been ignored, while others fear that if everyone starts acting like him, society will descend into complete chaos. This conflict becomes one of the strongest themes in the movie because there are no easy answers. Even viewers who disagree with Sanders may understand why he chose this path, while those who support him are constantly reminded of the terrible consequences that come with taking the law into one's own hands. Army Hammer approaches the role with a restrained performance. Instead of portraying Sanders as an unstoppable action hero from the very beginning, he allows the audience to witness a gradual transformation. Early in the story, Sanders is composed and speaks very little, almost as if he is carefully calculating every decision. As the violence escalates and the pressure from law enforcement increases, small cracks begin to appear in his personality. His confidence slowly turns into obsession, and his determination begins affecting every relationship around him. This progression makes the character feel more believable than a traditional action protagonist who never questions his own choices. Costas Mandylor provides an effective contrast as Henry, the investigator assigned to stop Sanders. Rather than serving as a typical villain or obstacle, Henry represents the importance of legal institutions. He understands why some citizens admire the vigilante, yet he also knows that allowing one individual to decide who deserves punishment creates an extremely dangerous precedent. The conflict between Sanders and Henry is not simply a battle between good and evil. Instead, it becomes a clash between two different ideas of justice. One believes that immediate action is necessary when the system fails, while the other argues that abandoning the rule of law ultimately creates even greater injustice. Director Uwe Boll has always been known for making films that challenge audiences, and Citizen Vigilante follows that tradition. Instead of filling every minute with explosions and gunfights, he frequently pauses the action to let conversations develop. These quieter scenes explore fear, anger, frustration, and the emotional cost of violence. Ball appears less interested in glorifying vigilantism than in examining why some people begin supporting it in the first place. Whether viewers agree with his perspective or not, the film repeatedly encourages them to question their own beliefs about crime and punishment. Visually, the production benefits from its Croatian filming locations. Narrow streets, industrial areas, apartment buildings, and coastal neighborhood create a grounded atmosphere that feels far removed from the glossy style of many Hollywood action films. Rather than relying heavily on computer generated imagery, the filmmakers use practical locations and straightforward cinematography to make every confrontation feel immediate. This realism helps increase the tension because the events appear as though they could happen in an ordinary city rather than a fictional action universe. The action choreography also reflects this realistic approach. Instead of featuring exaggerated martial arts or impossible stunts, most fights are short, brutal, and chaotic. Sanders does not always emerge without injuries, and every confrontation carries visible consequences. This grounded style makes the violence feel more impactful because victories come through preparation and determination instead of superhuman abilities. Even the gunfights avoid excessive spectacle, focusing instead on suspense and uncertainty. Another notable aspect of the movie is its treatment of technology and social media. Sanders becomes famous not only because of what he does, but because every incident is instantly recorded, uploaded, and shared online. Videos of his attacks spread across multiple platforms, creating heated debates among millions of viewers. The film suggests that in today's digital world, a single violent act can become a global event within minutes. Fame, support, criticism, misinformation, and conspiracy theories all develop simultaneously, making Sanders as much an internet phenomenon as he is a vigilante. The screenplay also explores the psychological burden carried by its main character. Every mission forces Sanders further away from the normal life he once enjoyed. Friends become suspicious, trust disappears, and his growing reputation creates constant danger. Even when he successfully eliminates another criminal, there is never a sense of lasting victory. Instead, every success leads to another challenge, another enemy, and another difficult decision. The film repeatedly asks whether violence can truly solve violence or whether it simply creates an endless cycle that consumes everyone involved. One of the movie's strengths is its refusal to provide simple moral answers. Rather than clearly telling the audience whom to support, it presents multiple viewpoints through victims, police officers, journalists, politicians, and ordinary citizens. Each group has understandable motivations, making the overall conflict feel more complex than a standard revenge thriller. This ambiguity is likely to divide audiences, but it also encourages discussion long after the credits roll, despite its serious themes. The film includes several tense chase sequences and carefully staged confrontations that maintain the pacing. The combination of investigative drama, psychological conflict, and grounded action prevents the story from becoming repetitive. Every new mission changes the public's perception of Sanders while also increasing the pressure from authorities determined to capture him before his movement inspires copycat vigilantes. Interesting facts principal photography took place from January to April 2025 in Croatia. The film blends action with social commentary about justice, media influence, and public opinion. Much of the visual style relies on real locations instead of elaborate studio sets. The conflict between Sanders and Henry is designed as an ideological battle rather than a traditional hero versus villain showdown. The film deliberately leaves audiences questioning whether the main character should be admired, feared, or condemned. As the investigation tightens around Sanders, the movie raises the stakes by showing how his actions begin affecting people far beyond the criminals he targets. Every new attack creates another media storm, another political debate, and another argument about where justice truly comes from. The police increase surveillance, government officials promise stronger action, and journalists start digging into the mysterious vigilante's past. Instead of becoming frightened, Sanders grows even more determined. He believes that stopping now would mean allowing dangerous criminals to continue hurting innocent people. This mindset pushes him further down a path from which there may be no return. One of the strongest parts of the screenplay is how it examines the thin line between justice and revenge. At first, Sanders carefully chooses his targets and appears motivated by protecting society. As the story continues, however, viewers begin noticing subtle changes in his behavior. He becomes more isolated, trusts fewer people, and starts believing that only he can decide who deserves punishment. These moments are important because they remind the audience that absolute confidence can become dangerous. Even when someone begins with good intentions, the supporting cast helps strengthen this emotional conflict. Investigators, journalists, victims, and ordinary citizens each represent different sides of the debate. Some openly support Sanders, claiming that the legal system has failed them for years. Others argue that allowing vigilantes to operate freely would destroy the rule of law completely. These conversations never feel forced because they reflect real discussions that often happen whenever high profile crimes receive widespread public attention. The film also explores the influence of modern media. Television networks compete for exclusive interviews, online creators produce endless theories about Sanders' identity, and social media users turn him into a symbol. Some create artwork celebrating him, while others compare him to history's most dangerous criminals. This constant flood of opinions becomes almost as important as the physical conflict itself. The filmmakers suggest that in today's world, public perception can change faster than the truth. Visually, the second half of the movie becomes darker. Nighttime scenes dominate the story with abandoned warehouses, narrow streets, underground parking garages, and industrial districts replacing the brighter settings from earlier in the film. Cinematographer Matthias Neumann uses shadows, practical lighting, and reflections to create an atmosphere of uncertainty. Every location feels believable, helping the audience imagine that these events could happen in any modern city. The editing also deserves attention. Rather than relying on extremely fast cuts during action scenes, the film often allows fights to play out in longer shots. This makes the violence easier to follow and gives every punch, fall, and gunshot greater impact. The choreography avoids flashy superhero style combat and instead focuses on realistic movements, emphasizing that Sanders is an ordinary man relying on planning rather than extraordinary abilities. Rodolfo Matulik's musical score becomes increasingly emotional as the story progresses. Quiet piano melodies appear during reflective scenes, while electronic rhythms and orchestral percussion build tension before confrontations. Instead of overpowering the action, the music complements it, allowing suspense to grow naturally. Several scenes become more memorable because the soundtrack remains restrained until the final moments when it suddenly expands into a powerful orchestral theme. One of the movie's most interesting aspects is how it avoids presenting Sanders as either completely right or completely wrong. There are moments when audiences may cheer for his victories against violent criminals, but those same victories often create new problems. Families suffer, innocent bystanders become afraid, and law enforcement struggles to maintain public trust. This balance keeps the narrative morally complex instead of turning it into a straightforward celebration of vigilantism. The movie also contains several visual details that viewers may notice just during a second watch. News broadcasts in the background often foreshadow upcoming events. Newspaper headlines reveal changes in public opinion before characters discuss them directly. Graffiti appearing on walls evolves throughout the story, reflecting Sanders' growing influence among ordinary citizens. These subtle background elements reward attentive viewers and help create a believable world where every event has consequences. Although Citizen Vigilante includes plenty of action, its emotional core lies in the psychological transformation of its main character. Sanders begins as someone frustrated by injustice, but every decision pushes him further away from the life he once knew. The film repeatedly asks whether someone can fight monsters without eventually becoming one. It never provides an easy answer, allowing viewers to reach their own conclusions. Following its release, the movie quickly became a topic of discussion among action fans and film critics. Many praised the grounded action sequences, realistic locations, and willingness to tackle controversial themes. Others criticized the film for its heavy handed political commentary and bleak tone. As with many of Uwe Boll's previous projects, audience reactions were sharply divided. Supporters appreciated its refusal to follow traditional Hollywood formulas, while detractors argued that its message was too provocative and its storytelling uneven. Because of its controversial premise and the involvement of Army Hammer, the film generated significant online conversation. Discussions focused not only on the story but also on Hammer's performance and whether the movie represented a successful comeback for the actor. Some viewers believed he delivered one of his strongest performances in years, particularly because the role required restraint rather than constant action hero bravado. Others felt that the surrounding controversy overshadowed the film itself. From a commercial perspective, Citizen Vigilante was released as an independent production with a much smaller distribution strategy than major studio blockbusters. Its financial performance depended largely on international markets, digital platforms, and on demand viewing rather than a massive theatrical rollout. While it was never expected to compete with big budget franchise films, the movie gained additional attention through online discussions, reviews, and debates about its themes. Another reason the film continued attracting attention was its ending, which deliberately avoids a completely satisfying resolution. Rather than wrapping up every storyline neatly, it leaves audiences thinking about the long term consequences of Sanders' actions. The conclusion emphasizes that violence may solve immediate problems but often creates new ones, ensuring that conversations continue long after the credits finish rolling. More interesting facts: the project's original title, The Dark Knight, had to be changed before release. Uwe Boll served as writer, director, and producer, giving him unusually broad creative control. Croatia's real locations were chosen to enhance realism and reduce dependence on studio environments. The film intentionally keeps many moral questions unanswered, encouraging audience debate rather than delivering a clear message. Its combination of action, crime, psychological drama, and social commentary makes it different from a traditional revenge thriller. Beyond its story and action, one of the biggest reasons Citizen Vigilante became a conversation piece is because it reflects a growing trend in modern cinema. Recent action thrillers have moved away from unstoppable superheroes and instead focus on ordinary people pushed into extraordinary situations. Sanders is not a trained secret agent, nor does he possess advanced technology or superhuman abilities. He is simply a wealthy man who believes the system has failed. That simple idea makes the story feel more grounded because audiences can imagine how frustration and anger might slowly transform an ordinary citizen into someone willing to risk everything. The screenplay also raises uncomfortable questions about morality. If a dangerous criminal escapes punishment because of corruption or legal loopholes, should someone step in and deliver justice personally? The film never answers that question directly. Instead, it presents situations where every choice has serious consequences. This moral uncertainty is one of the reasons viewers continue discussing the movie after leaving the theater. As Sanders' reputation spreads, copycat incidents begin appearing throughout the film. Although these individuals are not connected to him personally, they claim inspiration from his actions. Some genuinely want to protect innocent people, while others simply use the vigilante movement as an excuse to commit violence. This development becomes one of the story's most important turning points because it demonstrates how quickly a symbol can grow beyond the control of the person who created it. The film also examines how governments respond when public confidence in institutions begins to weaken. Politicians promise reforms, police departments launch larger investigations, and news organizations devote constant coverage to every new development. Instead of reducing tension, these responses often make the situation even more complicated. Public trust continues shifting as each new event changes the narrative. From a filmmaking perspective, the production avoids many common action movie cliches. Rather than filling every scene with explosions, the director builds suspense through silence, careful pacing, and uncertainty. Several confrontations begin with nothing more than footsteps echoing through an empty building or distant sirens approaching in the background. These small details create tension long before the first shots fired. Lighting plays an important role throughout the movie. Bright daylight scenes early in the story gradually give way to darker environments illuminated by streetlights, vehicle headlights, and neon signs. This visual transition mirrors Sanders' psychological journey. As his mission becomes darker, the world around him appears darker as well. The costume design reflects the same philosophy. Sanders does not wear a recognizable superhero outfit or an elaborate disguise. His clothing remains practical and understated, helping him blend into ordinary crowds. This choice reinforces the idea that he could be almost anyone, a businessman by day and a vigilante by night. The simplicity of his appearance makes him more believable and, in some ways, even more unsettling. Another strength of the movie is its sound design. During many action scenes, the audience hears every footstep, every breath, and every impact with remarkable clarity. Instead of masking these sounds beneath constant music, the filmmakers allow silence to heighten the realism. This approach gives the action greater weight because every confrontation feels immediate and dangerous. The film's pacing is also worth mentioning. Instead of rushing from one action sequence to another, it alternates between quieter character moments and bursts of intense violence. These pauses give viewers time to understand Sanders' emotional state while also allowing suspense to build naturally before the next confrontation. This rhythm keeps the movie engaging without becoming exhausting. Following its release, discussions quickly appeared across social media. Some viewers praised the film's willingness to tackle difficult subjects without offering easy solutions. Others argued that its themes were intentionally provocative and likely to divide audiences. Regardless of individual opinions, most agreed that Citizen Vigilante was not a movie designed to be forgotten. It challenged viewers to think about justice, personal responsibility, and the dangers of taking the law into one's own hands. Film critics were similarly divided. Positive reviews highlighted Armie Hammer's restrained performance, the grounded cinematography, and the film's ambition to explore complex social issues through the framework of an action thriller. Less favorable reviews criticize certain story developments, arguing that some ideas deserve deeper exploration or that the pacing occasionally slowed too much between action sequences. These contrasting opinions only increased curiosity among audiences, encouraging many people to watch the film and form their own conclusions. The movie also became a popular topic for online analysis. YouTube reviewers, podcasters, and film bloggers examined its symbolism, political undertones, and ending in great detail. Some interpreted Sanders as a warning about the dangers of unchecked power, while others viewed him as a reflection of public frustration with broken institutions. Because the film leaves many questions unanswered, it naturally inspired multiple interpretations. One interesting element that many viewers noticed is the use of mirrors and reflections throughout the movie. Sanders is frequently shown looking into mirrors, windows, or reflective surfaces during moments of self doubt. These visual choices appear to symbolize his internal conflict, suggesting that he is constantly questioning whether he is still the same person he was before beginning his vigilante mission. The ending is deliberately open to interpretation. Without revealing every detail, the final scene suggests that while one chapter of Sanders' story may have ended, the ideas he inspired continue spreading. The film implies that movements built on public anger rarely disappear overnight. Even if one individual is stopped, the frustrations that created the movement remain unresolved. This conclusion reinforces the movie's central message. The real conflict is not simply between one man and the law, but between society's expectations and its institutions. For viewers who enjoy grounded action thrillers with psychological depth, Citizen Vigilante offers much more than shootouts and chase scenes. It combines suspense with social commentary, asks difficult moral questions, and refuses to provide comfortable answers. That willingness to provoke discussion is perhaps the film's greatest achievement. Whether audiences consider it a bold, modern thriller or a controversial experiment, it is the kind of movie that encourages debate long after the credits roll. As years pass, Citizen Vigilante may ultimately be remembered less for its action scenes and more for the conversations it sparked about justice, responsibility, media influence, and the consequences of deciding that one person should become judge, jury, and executioner. That lasting impact is often what separates an ordinary action movie from one that continues generating discussion long after its release. One aspect that becomes clearer after thinking about Citizen Vigilante is that the movie is not really about defeating criminals. On the surface, that is exactly what the audience sees, one man hunting people who have escaped justice. But underneath the action, the film is asking a much larger question. What happens when ordinary people completely lose faith in the system that is supposed to protect them? Every major event in the story grows from that single idea. The action may keep viewers entertained, but the social questions are what stay in their minds after the credits roll. The writers carefully build this theme through small moments rather than long speeches. Throughout the film, background television reports mention rising crime rates, public demonstrations, and growing frustration among citizens. Newspaper headlines briefly visible on cafe tables hint that public confidence in government institutions is declining. These details are easy to miss during a first viewing, but together they create the feeling that Sanders' transformation did not happen in isolation. Instead, he becomes a product of a society that is already beginning to lose patience. Another interesting detail is the way the film handles public opinion. Early in the story, Sanders is almost universally condemned. News channels describe him as a dangerous criminal, and authorities promise that he will soon be arrested. As more information about his victims becomes public, however, the narrative begins to shift. Families of crime victims express gratitude, commentators begin questioning whether the legal system has failed, and public support slowly increases. The film never suggests that this change is entirely positive. Instead, it shows how quickly public opinion can swing from one extreme to another, especially in the age of social media. The relationship between Sanders and Henry also becomes more fascinating as the movie progresses. Although they spend much of the story trying to outsmart each other, there are moments where they almost seem to understand one another. Henry recognizes that Sanders is motivated by genuine frustration rather than greed or personal ambition. Sanders, in turn, understands that Henry is simply trying to uphold the law. This mutual understanding adds emotional depth because the conflict is based on ideology rather than personal hatred. From a directing standpoint, Uwe Boll avoids portraying either character as completely right or completely wrong. Instead, he allows viewers to decide for themselves. This approach may frustrate audiences looking for a clear hero and villain, but it also gives the movie greater complexity. By refusing to provide easy answers, the film encourages viewers to continue discussing its themes long after watching it. The visual storytelling deserves additional appreciation. Instead of relying on expensive special effects, the filmmakers create tension through composition and atmosphere. Empty streets late at night, long shadows stretching across abandoned buildings, and quiet parking garages become just as important as the action itself. These environments make the audience feel isolated alongside Sanders, reinforcing his growing emotional distance from the rest of society. The editing style also reflects the movie's themes. During calmer scenes, cuts are slow and deliberate, giving viewers time to absorb conversations and emotional reactions. During action sequences, however, the pace increases without becoming confusing. Every chase, fight, and confrontation remains easy to follow because the camera avoids excessive shaking or overly rapid editing. This straightforward style helps the audience remain emotionally connected to the characters instead of becoming distracted by flashy filmmaking techniques. One of the film's quieter achievements is its portrayal of fear. Fear is not limited to victims or criminals. Police officers fear losing control of public order. Politicians fear losing public support. Journalists fear reporting incorrect information in a rapidly changing situation. Sanders himself fears that stopping his mission will allow dangerous people to continue harming innocent citizens. Every major character is motivated by fear in one form or another, making the conflict feel more realistic. The soundtrack continues supporting these emotional moments without drawing unnecessary attention to itself. Rather than announcing every dramatic scene with loud music, composer Rodolfo Matulik frequently allows silence to dominate. The absence of music during several confrontations creates an almost documentary like realism, making viewers feel as though they are witnessing real events rather than watching a fictional action movie. As discussions about the film spread online, many viewers began comparing Citizen Vigilante to classic Vigilante films from previous decades. While those earlier movies often focused almost entirely on revenge, this film spends considerably more time examining media influence, public perception, and institutional trust. That broader focus helps distinguish it from many earlier entries in the genre. Another fascinating point is how the movie portrays fame. Sanders never seeks celebrity status, yet modern technology turns him into a global symbol almost overnight. Anonymous online users create artwork inspired by him, debate his motivations, and invent conspiracy theories about his identity. Some supporters even begin wearing clothing and symbols associated with his movement. These developments demonstrate how quickly an individual's actions can evolve into something much larger than originally intended. For content creators and movie reviewers, this aspect provides plenty of material for discussion. The film invites audiences to ask whether modern media amplifies conflict rather than resolving it. Every news report, social media post, and viral video increases Sanders' influence while simultaneously making it harder for authorities to restore order. This creates a cycle where attention itself becomes part of the problem. The movie's dialogue is generally straightforward and accessible, avoiding overly complicated philosophical discussions. Instead of delivering long speeches about justice, characters express their beliefs through short conversations and personal experiences. This simple writing style makes the themes easier for general audiences to understand while still leaving room for deeper interpretation. Perhaps the film's greatest strength is its willingness to embrace ambiguity. Viewers expecting a conventional action movie where the hero defeats every villain and walks away victorious may be surprised. Citizen Vigilante is more interested in exploring consequences than celebrating victories. Every success comes with a cost, every decision creates new problems, and every answer raises another question. That complexity ensures the movie remains memorable even for audiences who disagree with its perspective. In the years ahead, the film may continue attracting attention not because it provides definitive answers, but because it reflects real world debates about justice, accountability, media influence, and the limits of personal responsibility. Those themes are unlikely to become irrelevant, which means Citizen Vigilante has the potential to remain a topic of discussion long after newer action movies have faded from public memory. Interesting facts: the film deliberately avoids portraying its protagonist as a traditional action hero, focusing instead on his psychological transformation. Their role, news reports, and newspaper headlines subtly expand the world without interrupting the main story. Real Croatian locations contribute significantly to the movie's grounded visual style. Silence is used as a storytelling tool, increasing tension during several of the film's most important scenes. The ending is intentionally open ended, encouraging audiences to debate its meaning rather than providing a simple conclusion. As the film settles into its final act, it becomes clear that Citizen Vigilante is less interested in delivering a traditional action climax and more focused on exploring the consequences of every decision Sanders has made. By this point, he has become one of the most recognizable people in the country without ever trying to become famous. Every move he makes is watched by the media, discussed by politicians, and debated by ordinary citizens. His identity is no longer just that of a businessman or even a vigilante. He has become a symbol, and symbols are much harder to control than people. One of the most effective storytelling choices in the movie is that the filmmakers avoid showing every event from Sanders' perspective. Several scenes follow journalists, police investigators, and even ordinary citizens who have never met him. These moments expand the world beyond the main character and show how one person's actions can influence thousands of strangers. Some people begin locking their doors earlier at night, while others feel safer believing that someone is finally fighting back against criminals. The contrast between fear and hope runs throughout the film, reminding viewers that every major event affects different people in different ways. The screenplay also spends time examining the emotional cost of becoming a vigilante. Sanders may appear confident during his missions, but quieter scenes reveal someone carrying an enormous psychological burden. He sleeps less, distances himself from people he once trusted, and constantly looks over his shoulder. Every success makes his next decision even more difficult because there is no obvious way to stop. The audience begins to understand that becoming a symbol of justice also means sacrificing the possibility of returning to an ordinary life. Army Hammer's performance becomes stronger during these emotional scenes. Rather than relying on dramatic speeches, he communicates Sanders' exhaustion through subtle facial expressions and restrained body language. Moments of silence often reveal more about the character than pages of dialogue could. His increasingly isolated appearance mirrors the film's central message that violence, even when motivated by good intentions, carries a heavy personal cost. Henry's role also becomes increasingly significant. As the investigation progresses, he begins questioning whether capturing Sanders will truly solve the larger problem. He realizes that public anger existed long before the vigilante appeared, and that arresting one man cannot erase years of frustration with the justice system. This realization adds complexity to the character, transforming him from a determined investigator into someone wrestling with difficult moral questions of his own. The cinematography deserves further recognition during these later scenes. The camera frequently frames Sanders alone within large urban spaces, emphasizing how isolated he has become despite his growing public influence. Empty streets, abandoned factories, and dimly lit buildings reinforce the feeling that he exists outside normal society. Wide shots are often followed by tight close ups, allowing viewers to experience both the physical scale of the city and the emotional isolation of its central character. Color also plays an important role throughout the movie. Earlier scenes contain warmer tones that reflect Sanders' ordinary life before embracing vigilantism. As the story progresses, cooler blues and grays dominate the image, creating a colder emotional atmosphere. This gradual visual shift happens so naturally that many viewers may not consciously notice it, yet it contributes significantly to the film's mood. The action sequences remain grounded until the very end. Instead of increasing the spectacle with impossible stunts, the filmmakers continue emphasizing realism. Injuries have consequences, ammunition is limited, and every confrontation carries genuine risk. This commitment to realism separates Citizen Vigilante from many modern action films where heroes often emerge unharmed regardless of the danger they face. Another notable aspect of the movie is its treatment of the media. Rather than acting as simple observers, journalists become active participants in shaping public perception. Headlines influence public opinion, interviews create new controversies, and constant coverage turns Sanders into an international topic of discussion. The film suggests that media attention can become almost as powerful as the events themselves, especially in an age where information spreads globally within minutes. Many viewers have pointed out that the movie contains several symbolic images. Repeated shots of empty courtrooms, damaged public buildings, and broken security cameras seem to represent declining trust in institutions. Meanwhile, recurring images of crowded public spaces suggest that society itself is always watching, judging, and reacting. These visual metaphors are subtle enough that they never interrupt the story, yet they add depth for audiences interested in analyzing the film more closely. Following its release, online discussions frequently focused on whether Sanders should be viewed as a hero, an anti hero, or simply a tragic figure. This disagreement reflects one of the film's greatest strengths. Rather than forcing audiences toward a single interpretation, it presents enough evidence to support multiple viewpoints. Some viewers admire Sanders' determination to protect innocent people, while others see him as proof that good intentions can still lead to dangerous outcomes. The ending has generated especially intense discussion because it refuses to provide a completely definitive conclusion. Instead of delivering a simple victory or defeat, the film leaves audiences reflecting on the broader impact of Sanders' choices. The final scene suggests that while individuals may disappear, ideas can continue spreading. Whether those ideas inspire hope or create greater conflict is left for viewers to decide. For movie reviewers and film enthusiasts, this open ended approach provides plenty of material for analysis. Every viewer may leave with a slightly different understanding of what the story ultimately means. Some interpret it as a warning against vigilantism, others see it as criticism of broken institutions, and still others view it as a character study about obsession and sacrifice. The fact that these interpretations can all exist simultaneously demonstrates the screenplay's willingness to embrace complexity. One of the most interesting production decisions was keeping the action relatively realistic despite the provocative premise. By avoiding exaggerated superhero elements, the filmmakers encourage audiences to imagine how similar events might unfold in the real world. This grounded approach makes the moral questions feel more immediate and prevents the story from becoming pure fantasy. The pacing of the final act also deserves praise. Rather than rushing toward a loud conclusion, the movie gradually increases emotional tension while maintaining suspense. Every conversation feels important because it contributes to the larger themes of justice, accountability, and personal responsibility. Even viewers who come primarily for the action may find themselves thinking more about the ideas than the fight scenes once the film ends. Ultimately, Citizen Vigilante succeeds not because it provides simple entertainment but because it encourages discussion. It challenges audiences to consider difficult questions about justice, institutional trust, media influence, and the consequences of taking the law into one's own hands. Whether viewers embrace its message or reject it entirely, the movie leaves a lasting impression by refusing to offer easy answers. That willingness to provoke debate may prove to be its most enduring legacy. Looking beyond the story itself, Citizen Vigilante can also be viewed as a reflection of how the action thriller genre has changed over the years. Classic revenge movies often followed a very simple formula. A hero lost someone close to them, hunted down the people responsible, defeated the villains, and the audience left the theater feeling satisfied. Citizen Vigilante deliberately avoids that straightforward structure. Instead of presenting revenge as a complete solution, the film repeatedly shows that every violent decision creates new complications. Even when Sanders succeeds in stopping dangerous criminals, the larger problems facing society remain unresolved. This modern approach gives the movie a different emotional weight. The audience is never encouraged to celebrate violence simply because it is directed toward bad people. Every confrontation carries emotional consequences that continue long after the physical fight has ended. Victims' families experience relief, but they also wonder what will happen next. Police officers question their own effectiveness. Politicians become increasingly divided over how to respond. These reactions make the fictional world feel much closer to reality than many traditional action films. Another strength of the screenplay is its understanding of public psychology. The movie suggests that people often look for symbols during difficult times. When society feels frustrated or powerless, individuals who appear willing to take decisive action can quickly become larger than life figures. Sanders never asks to become a public icon, yet circumstances transform him into one. This transformation reflects how modern media can elevate ordinary individuals into global topics almost overnight. The filmmakers also spend considerable time exploring loneliness. Although Sanders becomes famous across the country, he is emotionally more isolated than ever before. Every new supporter also brings new enemies. Every successful mission increases the pressure placed upon him. The irony is that while millions of people believe they know him, very few actually understand what he is experiencing. This emotional contradiction gives the character additional depth beyond his role as an action protagonist. Throughout the film, there is a recurring idea that justice means different things to different people. For victims, justice may simply mean seeing dangerous criminals stopped before they hurt anyone else. For law enforcement, justice requires following legal procedures even when those procedures are slow or imperfect. For Sanders, justice eventually becomes deeply personal. These conflicting definitions create much of the movie's dramatic tension because none of the characters are acting without reason. The dialogue remains grounded and natural throughout these discussions. Characters rarely deliver long speeches explaining the movie's themes. Instead, they express frustration, hope, fear, and uncertainty in conversations that feel believable. This restrained writing style allows audiences to interpret the larger ideas without feeling that the film is lecturing them. From a technical perspective, the sound mixing deserves attention. Gunfire is loud and abrupt, footsteps echo realistically through empty buildings, and background city noises constantly remind viewers that life continues around the central conflict. Even quiet moments contain subtle ambient sounds that help maintain immersion. This attention to detail contributes to the grounded atmosphere that defines much of the production. The editing continues supporting the film's realistic style. Instead of cutting rapidly between dozens of camera angles during every fight, many confrontations unfold in relatively long takes. This allows viewers to understand the geography of each location and appreciate the physical effort involved in every movement. The absence of excessive visual effects also helps preserve the film's believable tone. As discussions about the movie expanded online, audiences began identifying numerous small details hidden throughout the story. Some noticed recurring references to broken clocks, interpreting them as symbols that time is running out for both Sanders and the institutions trying to stop him. Others focused on recurring images of empty public spaces, suggesting that they represent the growing distance between citizens and the systems designed to protect them. Whether these interpretations were intentional or not, they demonstrate how the film encourages viewers to search for deeper meaning. The ending has also inspired a wide variety of audience theories. Some believe Sanders ultimately succeeds in changing public attitudes toward crime, while others argue that his actions merely create additional instability. Because the conclusion avoids explicitly resolving every question, viewers are free to develop their own interpretations based on the themes present throughout the story. This ambiguity has helped the movie remain a topic of conversation well beyond its initial release. One particularly interesting aspect is how the film portrays reputation. Sanders gradually discovers that once people begin viewing someone as either a hero or a villain, changing that perception becomes almost impossible. Supporters continue defending him even when his actions become more questionable, while critics refuse to acknowledge any positive outcomes resulting from his mission. The film suggests that public opinion often depends less on facts than on pre existing beliefs. The movie also comments on the speed at which information spreads in the digital age. Rumors travel faster than official statements. Edited video clips shape public understanding before complete evidence becomes available, and online discussions frequently reach conclusions long before investigations are finished. These elements make the fictional story feel closely connected to modern society. From a performance standpoint, the supporting cast contributes significantly to the film's credibility. Rather than existing only to assist or oppose the protagonist, secondary characters each have understandable motivations. Investigators struggle with impossible decisions, journalists balance public interest with responsible reporting, and ordinary citizens react according to their own personal experiences. This broader perspective helps the world feel fully developed rather than revolving entirely around Sanders. Another fascinating production choice is the decision to avoid romantic subplots dominating the narrative. Many action films interrupt their central stories with lengthy romantic storylines. Citizen Vigilante remains focused on its primary themes of justice, responsibility, and societal change. While personal relationships influence Sanders' decisions, they never overshadow the film's central conflict. As more viewers revisit the movie, appreciation for its quieter scenes continues to grow. While the action sequences initially attract attention, many audiences later discover that the conversations, moments of silence, and emotional conflicts leave the strongest lasting impression. This balance between entertainment and thoughtful storytelling distinguishes the film from more conventional revenge thrillers. Ultimately, Citizen Vigilante asks viewers to think beyond the excitement of its action scenes. It encourages reflection on trust, responsibility, media influence, and the complex relationship between justice and revenge. Rather than presenting a world divided neatly between heroes and villains, it portrays a society where every decision has consequences and every solution creates new challenges. That willingness to embrace complexity ensures that the film remains relevant not only as an action thriller but also as a conversation starter about issues that continue to shape the modern world. As viewers look back on Citizen Vigilante after the credits roll, many realize that the film quietly plants clues throughout its runtime that become more meaningful in hindsight. During an initial viewing, these moments can seem like ordinary background details. On a second watch, however, they reveal how carefully the story is structured. Conversations that appear casual often foreshadow future events, while news broadcasts and headlines subtly hint at the direction in which society is moving. This layered storytelling rewards audiences who pay close attention. One recurring idea throughout the film is that every action creates a reaction. Sanders believes he is solving a problem by removing dangerous criminals from society, but each victory introduces new complications. Criminal organizations become more aggressive, law enforcement increases surveillance, politicians demand emergency measures, and ordinary citizens become increasingly divided. The film suggests that no action exists in isolation. Every decision, no matter how well intentioned, sends ripples through society that cannot always be predicted. The screenplay also explores how fear influences decision making. Criminals fear becoming Sanders' next target. Police officers fear losing public confidence. Politicians fear appearing weak. Journalists fear missing the biggest story of the year. Sanders himself fears that stopping his mission will allow innocent people to suffer. By giving nearly every major character a fear driven motivation, the writers create a world where conflict grows naturally rather than through artificial plot twists. Another subtle theme is the difference between justice and satisfaction. Throughout the movie, several characters experience moments that appear victorious on the surface, yet those victories rarely provide lasting peace. Criminals are stopped, investigations make progress, and public opinion shifts repeatedly, but genuine closure remains difficult to achieve. The film argues that justice is often far more complicated than simply punishing wrongdoers. Visually, the production continues emphasizing realism over spectacle. Buildings appear weathered rather than glamorous. Streets feel lived in instead of perfectly clean. Even government offices avoid the polished appearance commonly found in big budget action films. This attention to environmental details strengthens the illusion that these events could unfold in an ordinary modern city. The costume design follows the same philosophy. Sanders' clothing changes subtly throughout the film as his circumstances evolve. Early scenes feature well tailored business attire that reflects his successful professional life. As his vigilante activities intensify, practicality replaces elegance. Dark jackets, comfortable footwear, and functional accessories become more common, reflecting a man whose priorities have fundamentally changed. These visual adjustments happen gradually, making his transformation feel believable rather than sudden. The film's use of lighting deserves additional praise. Many indoor scenes rely on natural looking, practical lights instead of dramatic Hollywood spotlights. Offices are illuminated by fluorescent fixtures, parking garages by harsh overhead lamps, and apartments by ordinary household lighting. This understated approach helps maintain the grounded tone established from the beginning. Another impressive element is the restraint shown during emotional scenes. Rather than filling dramatic moments with loud music or exaggerated performances, the filmmakers frequently allow silence to dominate. Characters often communicate through expressions rather than speeches. This confidence in visual storytelling demonstrates an understanding that audiences do not always need every emotion explained through dialogue. As the movie gained attention, online discussions expanded beyond the story itself. Film enthusiasts debated whether Citizen Vigilante represented Uwe Boll's most mature work as a director. Some argued that the film demonstrated greater thematic ambition than many of his earlier projects, while others believed it still contained the provocative style for which he has become known. Regardless of individual opinions, there was broad agreement that the movie generated more serious discussion than many expected. Army Hammer's performance also became a major topic of conversation. Many reviewers observed that the role required controlled intensity rather than constant displays of physical strength. Sanders spends much of the movie thinking, observing, and making difficult decisions instead of engaging in non stop action. This quieter approach allowed Hammer to portray emotional exhaustion and moral uncertainty without relying on dramatic dialogue. One fascinating aspect of audience reactions is how personal experiences influence interpretations of the story. Viewers with strong faith in legal institutions often viewed Sanders as a dangerous example of vigilantism. Others who felt frustrated by perceived failures within justice systems found his motivations easier to understand. This wide range of responses demonstrates that the film succeeds in encouraging viewers to examine their own beliefs rather than simply accepting a predetermined message. The screenplay also comments on leadership without making direct political statements. Sanders never officially leads an organization, yet his actions inspire countless others. This unintended leadership becomes one of the film's central conflicts. The story suggests that influence carries responsibility even when that influence develops accidentally. Once people begin following someone's example, controlling the consequences becomes nearly impossible. Technology plays an increasingly important role as the story unfolds. Security cameras, smartphones, online broadcasts, and social media all contribute to the narrative. Information travels instantly, but accuracy does not always keep pace. Edited videos, incomplete reports, and emotional reactions spread faster than verified facts, creating confusion that benefits some characters while harming others. This portrayal feels particularly relevant in today's digital environment. Several scenes also explore the emotional burden carried by law enforcement officers. Rather than presenting the police as simple obstacles to Sanders' mission, the film portrays many officers as dedicated professionals facing impossible circumstances. They must enforce the law while recognizing the public frustration that gave rise to vigilantism in the first place. This balanced portrayal adds credibility to the story by avoiding simplistic stereotypes. The production design deserves recognition for creating locations that reflect the characters' emotional states. Spacious offices gradually give way to cramped rooms and abandoned industrial spaces as Sanders becomes increasingly isolated. Public areas become quieter and more deserted during later scenes, reinforcing the growing sense of loneliness surrounding the protagonist. These environmental choices strengthen the storytelling without requiring additional dialogue. As more people analyze the movie, numerous fan theories emerged regarding hidden symbolism. Some viewers interpreted recurring bridge imagery as representing the fragile connection between justice and revenge. Others suggested that repeated shots of empty streets symbolize society's growing emotional distance from its own institutions. Whether intentional or not, these interpretations demonstrate how the film encourages audiences to search for meaning beneath its action thriller surface. Ultimately, Citizen Vigilante remains memorable because it refuses to become a conventional revenge story. It asks difficult questions without pretending to possess simple answers. By combining grounded action, psychological tension, social commentary, and morally complex characters, The film creates an experience that continues generating discussion long after audiences leave the theater. That lasting ability to provoke conversation may ultimately become its greatest achievement, ensuring that it is remembered not only for its action sequences but also for the challenging ideas at its core. As the discussion around Citizen Vigilante continued to grow, many film lovers began comparing it with some of the most influential vigilante movies ever made. While it clearly belongs to the same genre, it approaches familiar ideas from a different angle. Traditional vigilante films often focus on the excitement of watching criminals receive immediate punishment. In contrast, Citizen Vigilante spend just as much time examining the emotional, legal, and social consequences of those actions. The excitement is still there, but it is constantly balanced by difficult questions that prevent the audience from viewing the conflict in simple black and white terms. One of the film's greatest achievements is the atmosphere it creates. From the opening scenes to the closing moments, there is an ongoing feeling that something unexpected could happen at any time. Even during quiet conversations, the audience senses that danger is never far away. This tension is maintained not through constant action but through careful pacing, realistic performances, and an effective use of silence. The filmmakers understand that suspense is often created by what the audience does not see rather than by what is shown directly. The city itself almost becomes another character in the story. Busy intersections, quiet residential neighborhoods, industrial districts, and government buildings all contribute to the film's mood. Rather than presenting an idealized version of urban life, locations feel authentic and lived in. Every alleyway, parking structure, and office building appears to have its own history, making the environment feel believable and immersive. As Sanders' mission expands, the screenplay begins exploring another important theme: responsibility. Early in the film, he believes that his only responsibility is to stop dangerous criminals. Later, he realizes that every decision influences innocent people as well. Families, police officers, journalists, and ordinary citizens all become affected by his choices. This gradual realization forces him to confront a difficult truth. Even if his intentions are good, he cannot control how others interpret or imitate his actions. The film also explores the psychological effects of constantly living under pressure. Sanders rarely enjoys moments of genuine peace. He becomes increasingly cautious, checking his surroundings, avoiding unnecessary conversations, and preparing for threats that may never arrive. These behaviors reflect the emotional cost of his double life. Although he appears strong on the outside, the audience can see that years of stress are beginning to affect his judgment and emotional stability. Another strength of the screenplay is its treatment of secondary characters. Instead of existing only to support the protagonist, many supporting roles have meaningful personal journeys. Journalists struggle to balance responsible reporting with the pressure to attract viewers. Police officers debate the effectiveness of traditional law enforcement methods. Victims' families experience conflicting emotions as they witness Sanders' campaign. These additional perspectives make the story richer by demonstrating that every major event affects society in multiple ways. From a filmmaking standpoint, the production maintains impressive consistency. The visual style established during the opening scenes continues throughout the movie, creating a unified atmosphere. The color palette remains restrained, avoiding overly saturated images that might distract from the grounded tone. Camera movements are deliberate rather than flashy, allowing viewers to focus on character interactions instead of technical spectacle. The action choreography deserves recognition for its practical approach. Every confrontation appears carefully planned yet still unpredictable. Characters become tired, make mistakes, and occasionally lose control of situations despite careful preparation. This realism separates the film from action movies where protagonists rarely face meaningful physical limitations. Here, every encounter carries genuine uncertainty because victory is never guaranteed. Music continues supporting the emotional journey without overwhelming it. Composer Rodolfo Matulik understands when silence can be more effective than orchestral intensity. During several of the film's most dramatic moments, the absence of music allows environmental sounds to dominate, increasing realism and emotional impact. When the score finally enters, it feels earned rather than routine. The movie also examines how quickly society creates narratives around public figures. Before many people know the complete truth about Sanders, they have already decided whether he is a hero or a villain. This reflects the modern tendency to form strong opinions based on incomplete information. The screenplay suggests that public perception often develops faster than factual understanding, especially in an era dominated by social media and continuous news coverage. Several scenes subtly illustrate this idea through background television broadcasts and online discussions. Different news organizations describe identical events using completely different language, demonstrating how presentation can shape interpretation. Viewers are reminded that information alone rarely determines public opinion. The way information is presented often matters just as much. Another fascinating element is the film's exploration of isolation. Despite becoming one of the country's most recognizable individuals, Sanders grows increasingly disconnected from ordinary human relationships. Fame does not bring comfort or companionship. Instead, it creates suspicion, distance, and constant pressure. This emotional isolation becomes one of the most tragic aspects of his character, emphasizing that symbolic figures often sacrifice their personal lives in ways the public never fully understands. The production design reinforces this loneliness through carefully chosen locations. Large empty rooms, deserted streets, and isolated buildings repeatedly surround Sanders during key moments. These visual choices communicate emotional distance without requiring additional dialogue. The audience gradually realizes that although Sanders is constantly surrounded by public attention, he has never felt more alone. Film analysts have also noted how the movie avoids simplistic optimism. It does not suggest that one individual can permanently solve society's problems through determination alone. Instead, it presents crime, corruption, and public frustration as deeply rooted issues requiring broader solutions. Sanders' actions may temporarily influence events, but they cannot erase the underlying conditions that created those problems in the first place. This realistic perspective contributes significantly to the film's emotional impact. Rather than ending with complete victory or total defeat, the story concludes by reminding viewers that meaningful change rarely happens overnight. Complex social issues cannot be resolved through a single dramatic event, regardless of how determined one individual may be. As time passes, Citizen Vigilante is likely to be remembered as a film that sparked conversation as much as entertainment. Some audiences will appreciate its grounded storytelling and moral complexity. Others may disagree with its themes or storytelling choices, yet few viewers are likely to forget the questions it raises about justice, responsibility, public trust, and the limits of individual action. In many ways, that may be the film's greatest accomplishment. Instead of encouraging audiences to leave the theater having witnessed only another action adventure, it invites them to continue discussing its ideas with friends, family, and fellow movie fans. Those conversations ensure that Citizen Vigilante remains relevant beyond its running time, proving that thoughtful action cinema can entertain while also challenging viewers to reflect on the world around them. As audiences continued revisiting Citizen Vigilante, many began appreciating how carefully the film balances entertainment with social commentary. It never forgets that it is an action thriller, delivering tense chases, dangerous confrontations, and moments of genuine suspense. At the same time, it refuses to let those action scenes exist without consequences. Every bullet fired, every arrest made, and every decision taken by Sanders changes the world around him in noticeable ways. This cause and effect structure gives the story a sense of realism that many modern action films often ignore. One of the most compelling ideas explored in the movie is the concept of legacy. Sanders initially believes his mission is temporary. He assumes that once enough criminals have been stopped, he can quietly return to his former life. As the story unfolds, however, he discovers that actions often outlive the people who perform them. His decisions inspire strangers, influence political debates, and become part of a much larger national conversation. Whether that legacy is positive or negative becomes one of the central questions left for viewers to answer. The screenplay also examines how quickly people simplify complicated situations. Throughout the movie, television programs, online commentators, and public discussions repeatedly reduce Sanders to either a fearless hero or a dangerous criminal. Very few people attempt to understand the emotional struggles that led him to this point. The film quietly criticizes this tendency, suggesting that real human beings are rarely as simple as public opinion makes them appear. Another remarkable aspect of the story is its patience. Unlike many thrillers that rush from one dramatic event to another, Citizen Vigilante allows emotional moments to breathe. There are scenes where Sanders simply sits alone, thinking about the consequences of his choices. These quieter sequences may not contain explosions or gunfire, but they reveal more about the character than any action sequence could. They remind the audience that behind every public symbol is an ordinary human being carrying private doubts and fears. The supporting performances continue strengthening these emotional moments. Characters who initially seem like minor figures gradually reveal their own perspectives on justice and responsibility. Victims express gratitude but also concern. Police officers admit frustration without abandoning their commitment to the law. Journalists struggle to balance truth with the pressure to produce attention grabbing headlines. These layered portrayals prevent the story from becoming overly simplistic. Visually, the film maintains its grounded identity until the very end. The cinematography avoids exaggerated slow motion or stylized action commonly found in blockbuster productions. Instead, it favors natural lighting, realistic camera placement, and carefully observed performances. This restrained approach helps viewers remain emotionally connected to the characters because the events feel plausible rather than exaggerated. The editing also deserves continued praise for maintaining clarity during action scenes. Every chase and confrontation unfolds in a way that allows viewers to understand exactly where each character is located and why every movement matters. This spatial awareness increases suspense because audiences always understand the risks facing the characters. One particularly interesting production choice is the film's use of ordinary locations. Office buildings, apartment complexes, parking garages, restaurants, and city streets become the settings for major dramatic moments. By avoiding extravagant environments, the filmmakers emphasize that extraordinary events can occur within everyday places. This familiarity makes the story more immersive because viewers can easily imagine similar situations unfolding in cities around the world. The dialogue continues reflecting the movie's realistic tone. Characters rarely deliver speeches designed solely to explain the plot. Instead, conversations feel natural, often revealing information indirectly through disagreements, questions, or personal observations. This understated writing style trusts the audience to connect the dots rather than providing constant explanations. As film critics and audience debated the movie, one recurring observation emerged. Citizen Vigilante is intentionally uncomfortable. It refuses to provide the emotional satisfaction typically associated with revenge stories. Even moments that appear triumphant are accompanied by reminders of the broader consequences. This refusal to celebrate violence uncritically distinguishes the film from many others within the same genre. The movie also presents an interesting examination of authority. Rather than portraying institutions as entirely corrupt or entirely effective, it acknowledges both strengths and weaknesses. Some officials genuinely seek justice, while others become trapped by bureaucracy or political pressure. Similarly, Sanders is neither portrayed as a flawless savior nor an irredeemable villain. This balanced perspective allows viewers to appreciate the complexity of the issues without feeling pushed toward a single conclusion. Another subtle strength lies in the recurring imagery of surveillance. Cameras appear throughout the film in stores, offices, public squares, and traffic intersections. Almost every major event is recorded from multiple angles, reminding viewers that modern society is constantly observing itself. Yet, despite this endless surveillance, misunderstandings continue to spread. The film suggests that having more information does not automatically lead to greater understanding. The emotional climax focuses less on physical confrontation and more on personal realization. Sanders gradually understands that while he can eliminate individual threats, he cannot single handedly repair society's deeper problems. This realization does not erase his determination, but it changes his understanding of what true justice requires. The audience is left reflecting on whether lasting change comes through individual action, institutional reform, or some combination of both. From a thematic perspective, the movie consistently returns to one central idea. Justice without accountability eventually becomes another form of power. This message is never delivered through direct lectures. Instead, it emerges naturally from the choices characters make and the consequences they experience. By allowing audiences to discover this theme for themselves, The screenplay becomes more engaging and thought provoking. As the years pass, Citizen Vigilante will likely remain relevant because its central questions are timeless. How much faith should people place in institutions? What responsibilities come with extraordinary influence? Can violence ever create lasting peace? Where is the line between justice and revenge? These are questions that continue appearing throughout history, ensuring that the film's themes remain meaningful beyond the specific events of its story. Perhaps the greatest compliment that can be paid to Citizen Vigilante is that it encourages conversation instead of demanding agreement. Some viewers will admire Sanders, others will condemn him, and many will find themselves somewhere in between. That diversity of interpretation reflects the film's confidence in its audience. Rather than offering simple answers, it presents a complicated world filled with equally complicated people. In the end, Citizen Vigilante is more than an action thriller. It is a character study, a social commentary, and a reflection on how modern societies respond to fear, injustice, and the desire for immediate solutions. Whether remembered for its performances, its moral ambiguity, when examining Citizen Vigilante from a broader cinematic perspective, it becomes clear that the film is trying to accomplish something more ambitious than delivering another revenge story. While action remains an important part of the experience, the emotional journey of Sanders ultimately becomes the heart of the narrative. The audience watches him evolve from a successful businessman into one of the most controversial figures in the country, but the transformation is gradual enough that every stage feels believable. Rather than changing overnight, he slowly loses confidence in the institutions around him until he convinces himself that direct action is the only remaining option. One reason this transformation works is because the screenplay spends time establishing Sanders' ordinary life before everything changes. He is introduced as someone who enjoys success, stability, and financial security. On the surface, he appears to have everything many people dream of achieving. However, the story gradually reveals that wealth cannot protect someone from disappointment, injustice, or emotional pain. This contrast between external success and internal frustration adds another layer to the character, making him more relatable despite the extraordinary choices he eventually makes. Another interesting aspect of the film is its treatment of power. Most action movies portray power through physical strength, advanced weapons, or political influence. Citizen Vigilante argues that information and public perception can be equally powerful. Sanders' greatest weapon is not necessarily his ability to confront criminals directly, but the way his actions influence millions of people watching from a distance. Every news report, online discussion, and viral video increases his symbolic power while simultaneously making his personal life more dangerous. The movie also highlights the unpredictable nature of public support. At various points, Sanders is praised, criticized, celebrated, and condemned, often within the same day. This constant shift reflects how quickly opinions can change in the modern world. The filmmakers appear interested in demonstrating that public approval is rarely permanent. Heroes can become villains overnight, and villains can unexpectedly receive sympathy depending on how events are presented. As the story progresses, the emotional burden carried by Sanders becomes increasingly visible. He spends less time enjoying ordinary moments and more time preparing for confrontations that may or may not occur. Sleep becomes difficult, relationships become strained, and trust becomes almost impossible. The audience gradually realizes that even if Sanders succeeds in his mission, he has already sacrificed many aspects of the life he once valued. This emotional cost becomes one of the film's most important messages. Henry's character provides an effective counterbalance throughout these developments. While Sanders becomes increasingly convinced that immediate action is necessary, Henry continues believing that long term stability depends upon preserving the rule of law. Their conflict is compelling because both perspectives contain elements of truth. Sanders identifies genuine problems within society, while Henry recognizes the dangers created when individuals decide to replace legal institutions with personal judgment. This ideological conflict remains far more engaging than a simple physical rivalry. From a visual standpoint, the filmmakers continue emphasizing realism through thoughtful production design. Police stations, government offices, residential neighborhoods, and commercial districts all appear authentic rather than stylized. The decision to film in real locations contributes significantly to this authenticity, giving the movie a texture that would have been difficult to recreate entirely through studio production. The cinematography frequently places physical barriers between characters during conversations. Windows, fences, doorways, and reflections often separate individuals even when they occupy the same space. These visual compositions subtly reinforce the emotional distance growing between different groups within society. Citizens, authorities, journalists, and Sanders himself all appear increasingly disconnected despite living in the same city. One particularly effective storytelling device is the use of ordinary routines. Early in the film, Sanders follows predictable daily habits associated with his professional life. As his vigilante activities expand, these routines gradually disappear. Meals become rushed, conversations become shorter, and moments of relaxation become almost non existent. Without directly stating it, the film communicates how completely his mission has consumed every aspect of his existence. The screenplay also explores the relationship between justice and accountability. Sanders believes criminals should face immediate consequences for their actions. However, the movie repeatedly asks whether someone delivering justice should also be accountable for their own decisions. This question becomes increasingly important as Sanders' influence grows. If one person possesses the authority to decide who deserves punishment, who evaluates that person's own actions? The film never provides an easy answer, allowing audiences to wrestle with the dilemma themselves. Another notable strength is the consistency of tone. Despite dealing with controversial themes, the movie rarely becomes melodramatic. Emotional scenes remain restrained, allowing performances and visual storytelling to communicate feelings naturally. This understated approach makes the dramatic moments more effective because they feel earned rather than exaggerated. The action sequences continue reflecting this philosophy. Violence is presented as dangerous, chaotic, and unpredictable rather than glamorous. Characters experience pain, become exhausted, and make mistakes under pressure. Every confrontation feels uncertain because the audience understands that realistic consequences exist. This grounded approach helps distinguish the film from more stylized action franchises. As viewers discussed the movie online, many praised its willingness to leave important questions unresolved. Instead of presenting definitive conclusions about vigilantism, justice, or institutional failure, the story encourages reflection. Some audiences interpreted Sanders as a tragic figure destroyed by his own obsession. Others viewed him as someone exposing uncomfortable truths about society's weaknesses. The existence of multiple valid interpretations demonstrates the screenplay's complexity. The film also comments on the speed of modern communication. Information spreads almost instantly, yet understanding develops much more slowly. Rumors often influence public opinion before verified facts become available. Characters repeatedly react to incomplete information, creating misunderstandings that drive the narrative forward. This portrayal feels particularly relevant in an era where social media frequently shapes public perception before investigations are complete. Another fascinating detail is the recurring contrast between crowded public spaces and isolated private moments. Sanders is constantly discussed by millions of people, yet many of the film's most emotionally significant scenes occur when he is completely alone. This contrast emphasizes the loneliness that often accompanies public notoriety. Becoming a symbol does not eliminate personal struggles. It frequently intensifies them. By the time the story reaches its conclusion, the audience understands that Citizen Vigilante was never simply about stopping criminals. It is about examining the consequences of losing faith in institutions, the burden of becoming a public symbol, and the moral uncertainty surrounding personal justice. These themes elevate the movie beyond a conventional action thriller and give it lasting relevance. Ultimately, the film leaves viewers with a challenge rather than a solution. It asks them to consider how societies should respond when legal systems appear insufficient, how media shapes public opinion, and whether any individual should possess the authority to decide who deserves justice. Those questions remain unanswered because the filmmakers recognize that real world problems rarely have simple solutions. In embracing that complexity, Citizen Vigilante becomes a film designed not only to entertain but also to provoke thoughtful discussion long after the final frame has disappeared. As the conversation surrounding Citizen Vigilante continued after its release, One thing became increasingly obvious. This was never intended to be a film that everyone would agree on. Some viewers praised its bold storytelling and realistic approach to the vigilante genre, while others believed its themes were too controversial. Ironically, those different opinions helped the movie gain even more attention. Every debate on social media, every review on YouTube, and every discussion between movie fans introduced the film to new audiences who wanted to see for themselves what all the controversy was about. One reason the film generated so much discussion is that it refuses to present perfect characters. Sanders is intelligent, determined, and courageous, but he is also stubborn, emotionally damaged, and increasingly isolated. He makes decisions that save lives, but he also makes choices that create new dangers. This combination of strengths and weaknesses makes him feel like a real human being instead of an unstoppable action hero. The screenplay deserves credit for avoiding the temptation to make every criminal completely one dimensional. While many of the antagonists clearly deserve punishment for their actions, the film also suggests that crime often grows from larger social problems rather than existing in isolation. Corruption, inequality, fear, and institutional failures all contribute to the environment in which Sanders operates. By acknowledging these broader issues, the movie encourages audiences to think beyond individual villains and consider the systems that allow crime to flourish. The film also presents an interesting examination of leadership. Sanders never asked people to follow him, yet many began treating him as a symbol of resistance. This unexpected leadership creates new responsibilities that he never anticipated. Every statement, every action, and every appearance influences public opinion in ways he cannot control. The movie suggests that influence often carries obligations whether someone seeks them or not. Another remarkable feature of the production is its commitment to practical filmmaking. Instead of relying heavily on computer generated effects, many action scenes appear grounded in real environments and physical performances. Explosions are limited, vehicle chases remain believable, and fight choreography emphasizes realism over spectacle. This practical approach helps immerse viewers because the action feels dangerous rather than exaggerated. The cinematography continues reinforcing the emotional themes through careful framing. Sanders is frequently positioned at the edge of the frame rather than in the center, visually suggesting that he no longer feels connected to the society around him. Reflections in windows and mirrors appear repeatedly, symbolizing his ongoing struggle to recognize the person he has become. These subtle visual techniques add depth without distracting from the narrative. The sound design deserves equal recognition. The filmmakers understand that silence can be just as powerful as loud music. During several of the movie's most intense moments, environmental sounds replace traditional action scores. The audience hears footsteps echoing through empty corridors, distant traffic, wind moving through abandoned buildings, and the quiet breathing of characters preparing for confrontation. These realistic sounds create tension that feels immediate and authentic. One fascinating element that becomes clearer upon repeated viewings is how carefully the movie handles time. Rather than rushing from one event to another, the story allows consequences to develop naturally. News reports follow investigations, public reactions evolve gradually, and characters change over weeks rather than overnight. This slower pace strengthens the realism because major social changes rarely happen instantly. Another theme running throughout the film is personal sacrifice. Sanders gradually gives up nearly everything that once defined his identity. His professional career becomes secondary. Personal relationships deteriorate. Moments of happiness become increasingly rare. Even his sense of security disappears as he becomes one of the most recognizable figures in the country. The audience realizes that while Sanders may be fighting for justice, he is simultaneously losing the ordinary life he once valued. The relationship between Sanders and Henry reaches its emotional peak because both men genuinely believe they are protecting society. Henry does not pursue Sanders out of personal hatred, but because he fears the long term consequences of allowing vigilantism to spread. Sanders, meanwhile, believes that waiting for institutions to improve will only result in more innocent people suffering. Their conflict represents two fundamentally different philosophies regarding justice, making every encounter between them emotionally compelling. The film also raises important questions about accountability in the digital age. Every action Sanders takes is recorded, discussed, analyzed, and often misunderstood. The speed with which information spreads means that public opinion frequently forms before all the facts become available. This observation reflects a reality familiar to modern audiences, where online discussions often reach conclusions long before official investigations are complete. Many film critics noted that Citizen Vigilante intentionally avoids satisfying emotional resolutions. Instead of offering audiences a simple victory, it leaves behind uncertainty. The central questions raised throughout the story remain relevant after the credits roll. Can violence ever permanently solve violence? Can public trust be restored once it has been lost? Is justice meaningful without accountability? These unresolved issues encourage viewers to continue thinking about the film long after watching it. Another strength lies in the supporting cast's ability to make the fictional world feel authentic. Police officers, reporters, government officials, victims, and ordinary citizens all react differently to the unfolding events. These varied perspectives prevent the narrative from becoming overly focused on a single viewpoint. Instead, the audience experiences the crisis through multiple lenses, creating a richer understanding of the situation. The production design also contributes significantly to the film's grounded atmosphere. Government buildings feel functional rather than glamorous. Residential neighborhoods appear ordinary instead of idealized. Even the locations chosen for major confrontations avoid excessive stylization. This realism reinforces the idea that extraordinary conflicts can emerge within everyday environments. One of the movie's most powerful messages is that symbols often become larger than the individuals who create them. By the end of the story, Sanders is no longer simply one man making personal decisions. He has become an idea interpreted differently by millions of people. Some view him as proof that courage can overcome injustice. Others see him as evidence that society becomes more dangerous when individuals reject legal institutions. Neither interpretation is presented as completely correct or completely wrong, allowing audiences to form their own conclusions. Ultimately, Citizen Vigilante succeeds because it respects the intelligence of its audience. Rather than simplifying complex moral questions into easy answers, it presents a world where every decision carries consequences and every perspective contains elements of truth. The action entertains, the performances engage, and the themes encourage reflection. This combination ensures that the film remains memorable not only as a thriller but also as a thoughtful exploration of justice, responsibility, public trust, and the difficult choices people make when they believe the system has failed them. As the film reaches its emotional conclusion, it becomes increasingly apparent that Citizen Vigilante is not interested in celebrating victory in the traditional sense. Most action movies end with the hero defeating the villain, restoring order, and returning to normal life. Here, the idea of normal no longer exists. Sanders has changed too much, society has changed too much, and even the people chasing him have begun questioning everything they once believed. The ending suggests that once a society experiences this level of division, there is no simple way to return to the way things were before. One of the movie's most impressive achievements is its willingness to trust the audience. Instead of explaining every message through lengthy dialogue, the film often allows images to communicate emotion. A quiet walk through an empty street, a television broadcasting another heated debate, or a newspaper headline briefly visible on a table often says more than several pages of dialogue. These visual storytelling techniques reward attentive viewers and encourage repeat viewings. The character of Sanders becomes more tragic the longer the story continues. At the beginning, he believes every action has a clear purpose. Every mission seems to bring him closer to justice. By the final act, however, he realizes that every success creates another challenge. Criminal organizations adapt, politicians exploit the situation for their own agendas, and ordinary citizens become even more divided. Instead of solving the problem, he finds himself trapped inside a conflict that has grown far beyond his control. This realization gives the film unexpected emotional depth. Sanders is no longer fighting only criminals, he is fighting the consequences of his own decisions. That internal conflict becomes just as important as the physical confrontations shown on screen. It transforms the movie from a straightforward thriller into a psychological character study about obsession, responsibility, and the price of believing that one individual can change an entire system. Henry experiences a similar transformation. At first, his objective seems straightforward: identify the vigilante, arrest him, and restore public order. As the investigation progresses, he begins understanding why so many citizens admire Sanders. Although he never approves of vigilantism, he cannot ignore the public frustration that created it. This growing awareness forces him to question whether enforcing the law alone is enough to rebuild public confidence. His journey mirrors Sanders in many ways, with both men gradually realizing that the real problem extends far beyond one individual. The film's pacing deserves praise because it allows these emotional developments to unfold naturally. Rather than forcing dramatic twists every few minutes, the screenplay gives characters time to reflect on their experiences. Conversations often linger after important events, allowing the emotional consequences to settle before the story moves forward. This slower rhythm may surprise viewers expecting non stop action, but it ultimately strengthens the narrative by giving every decision greater significance. Another area where the film succeeds is its realistic portrayal of uncertainty. Characters frequently make decisions based on incomplete information. Rumors spread faster than verified facts, emotional reactions influence public opinion, and media coverage sometimes creates more confusion than clarity. These elements make the fictional world feel remarkably similar to contemporary society, where information travels instantly but understanding often develops much more slowly. The production design continues supporting this realism through carefully selected locations. Rather than relying on spectacular landmarks or extravagant sets, the filmmakers choose ordinary office buildings, residential neighborhoods, government facilities, and industrial areas. These familiar environments make the story feel accessible because viewers can easily imagine similar events occurring within their own communities. The visual language of the movie also deserves closer attention. Throughout the film, barriers repeatedly appear between characters. Windows, fences, security gates, and glass partitions often separate individuals even when they are physically close together. These recurring images symbolize the emotional and ideological divisions growing throughout society. People occupy the same spaces while becoming increasingly disconnected from one another. Another fascinating detail is the consistent use of surveillance imagery. Cameras observe streets, businesses, public buildings, and transportation hubs, suggesting that modern society constantly watches itself. Yet, despite this endless observation, truth remains difficult to establish. The filmmakers appear to argue that technology can record events but cannot automatically create understanding. Human interpretation continues shaping reality just as much as objective evidence. The soundtrack reaches its emotional peak during the final moments of the film. Rather than relying on triumphant orchestral music, the score remains restrained, emphasizing reflection instead of celebration. Gentle piano themes blend with subtle electronic textures, creating an atmosphere that feels thoughtful rather than victorious. This musical restraint perfectly matches the film's refusal to offer simple emotional resolutions. One reason Citizen Vigilante continues generating discussion is its ability to support multiple interpretations simultaneously. Some audiences see Sanders as a cautionary example of how good intentions can become dangerous when accountability disappears. Others interpret him as someone exposing genuine weaknesses within existing institutions. Still, others focus primarily on his personal psychological decline, viewing the story as a tragedy about obsession rather than justice. The fact that all these readings remain plausible demonstrates the screenplay's complexity.